Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to Tuesday's reading lesson. The focus of the lesson today is vocabulary. So as we know, vocabulary is a fancy word for words. So we'll be looking at different words in the text that we might not be sure of the meaning of and working those out using the context. So if you don't have your things ready already, make sure that you go and get a pen, pencil and a piece of paper so that you can use for your chili challenges. Okay, go and get those now if you haven't already, and I'll see you back shortly to begin the lesson. So as I've just mentioned, the learning objective for the lesson today is to find and explain the meaning of words in context. So we're focusing all on our vocabulary viper today. So just a quick check. At the start of yesterday's lesson, I asked you to predict what Physalia physalis was, what you thought it meant, and what you thought it might have to do with chapter 7. Now, at the end of our reading session yesterday, we did actually discover what Physalia physalis was. Can you remember? Well done if you said the giant jellyfish. So Physalia physalis is the technical name for a Portuguese man-o'-war. So it's a huge jellyfish. Now I've got some facts here for you. I won't read them all, but I'll just read this part to you. So it says the Physalia physalis, or the Portuguese man-of-war, doesn't have a brain and it can't swim. Yet the Portuguese man-of-war thrives in warm oceans and has earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous creatures in the sea. The man-of-war dangles hundreds of feet of poisonous tentacles underwater as it sails along the surface, propelled only by the wind. So you can see at the bottom here, I've got the name of the species, Physalia physalis. Its size, it says its float or its bladder, so that's what it uses to float, is about 1 foot long, and its tentacles go from 40 to 150 feet long. So if we look at its body parts, it's got long dangling tentacles, gas-filled float with crest. The creature is named for the float's similarity to a Portuguese sailor's hat worn long ago. Oh, that's an interesting fact. So there are lots of interesting facts about the Portuguese man-o'-war. It might be something that you might want to go off and research independently in your own time. So I've got a starter task for you today, and it is to use your spy skills to unscramble yesterday's tricky words. So pause the video now and see if you can unscramble the letters in each of these words to find out, to remind you what yesterday's tricky words were. Pause the video and have a go. Welcome back, Year 6. Shall we check to see how you got on? Well done. So the first word was complex. In the case of the chapter we read, it was in the noun form, and it described a large, lots of clusters of different buildings that are joined together by walkways. A chauffeur, which was also a noun, and it was a word to describe a driver, somebody who drives private cars for a living. Then operative was a third word, also a noun, and it was a synonym for an agent or a spy. And then claustrophobic, do you remember what that means? Well, it's an adjective and it describes somebody who is afraid, or the state of being afraid of being in enclosed spaces. So well done if you used your spy skills to unscramble those words. I am now going to read the next part of Stormbreaker, the next few pages, and as I read, I would like you to jot down any unknown words, so any words that you're not sure of the meaning of. So what you could do, as soon as you hear me read a word that you're not sure of, pause the video, write it down on your piece of paper, and then play the video to continue. Okay, so I will start here. It was the single most awesome and repulsive thing Alex had ever seen. Physalia physalis. The voice came from behind him, and Alex twisted round to see a man coming down the last of the stairs. Herod Sile was short. He was so short that Alex's first impression was that he was looking at a reflection that had somehow been distorted. In his immaculate and expensive black suit, with gold signet ring and brightly polished black shoes, he looked like a scaled-down model of a multi-millionaire businessman. His skin was very dark, so that his teeth flashed when he smiled. He had a round, bald head and very horrible eyes. The grey irises were too small, completely surrounded by white. Alex was reminded of tadpoles before they hatch. When Sile stood next to him, the eyes were almost at the same level as his and held less warmth than the jellyfish. "The Portuguese man-o'-war," Sile continued. He had a heavy accent, brought with him from the Beirut marketplace. "It's beautiful, don't you think?" "I wouldn't keep one as a pet," Alex said. "I came upon this one when I was diving in the South China Sea." Sile gestured at a glass display case, and Alex noticed 3 harpoon guns and a collection of knives resting in velvet slots. "I love to kill fish," Sile went on, "but when I saw this specimen of Physalia physalis, I knew I had to capture it and keep it. You see, it reminds me of myself. It's 99% water. It has no brain, no guts, and no anus." Alex had dredged up the facts from somewhere and spoken them before he even knew what was going on. Sile glanced at him, then turned back to the creature hovering over him in its tank. "It's an outsider," he said. "It drifts on its own, ignored by the other fish. It is silent, and yet it demands respect. You see the nematocysts, Mr. Lester, the stinging cells? If you were to find yourself wrapped in those, it would be an exquisite death." "Call me Alex," Alex said. He'd meant to say Felix, but somehow it had slipped out. It was the most stupid, the most amateurish mistake he could ever have made. But he had been thrown by the way Sile had appeared and by the slow, hypnotic dance of the jellyfish. The grey eyes squirmed. "I thought your name was Felix." "My friends call me Alex." Alex has made quite a big mistake there, hasn't he? Now I hope you've written down any unknown words on your piece of paper, because they will be useful for you in the next part of the lesson. Now, just before we move on to that, I would like to recap the strategies and our steps to success for answering vocabulary questions. Now, can you think back to our reading lessons in school when we talk about vipers? What strategies you can use if you come across an unknown word in the text? Have a little think before we go through them together. Okay, welcome back. Now, you might have remembered some of the following strategies. So, reread the sentence or read ahead and use context clues. So, read around the word, read the paragraph that the word is in, and use those clues to try and piece together what the word means. Use clues from a picture or from another text feature. So, if you're looking at non-fiction texts, there might be pictures, there might be captions, subheadings that might help you with the definition. Or you might look for parts you know, so like the root word, the prefix or the suffix might give you a little bit of a clue about what the word means. So we've got an example here. Celebratory has the root word celebrate. So if you can work out if you know what celebrate means, then you can work out that celebratory is an adjective that describes somebody who is celebrating. And then another one, make a connection to another word you know. So that root word, it can help you make links to similar words, and that might help you with the meaning. One of my favourite ones here, number 5, is to substitute a synonym. So take the word out of the sentence and see if you can put a synonym for that word in. Reread the sentence and see if it still makes sense. And then finally, look the word up in the glossary or a dictionary. Now that's not always possible, is it, if you're doing a test and you're answering these vocabulary questions, but most of our reading is, actually sitting down enjoying a book at home or in school where there are plenty of dictionaries or the internet is available. So that is definitely possible for you to use as a strategy. So I have highlighted the strategies that we will be focusing on today in your chilies. So like I've just said, we're going to put those strategies into practice with the words that you have found from the text, the ones that you've just written down. Now you might have noticed that I haven't shown you any tricky words in today's lesson because you are actually going to be putting those together yourselves, okay? Because we've all got different words that we find tricky, so I think it's useful sometimes to choose your own tricky words because those are the words that you will learn and you will remember. So, Chili 1, you're going to choose 3 tricky words from the words that you've written down from the text, and you are going to research their definitions, so what those words mean. You can use a dictionary, you can use a dictionary app on your phone or tablet. Chili 2, you're going to choose 3 tricky words from the text, but before you research the definitions, you are going to predict what they might mean. So I will show you an example of where I've done that in a moment, but we have done this in school too. And Chili 3, you are going to complete Chili 2, and then you are going to find a word in the text, so you can go back to the close-up of the text that I've just read out, and find a word that contains one of the spelling rules we have learned about so far in Year 6, or in school. And your challenge is to find a word with a prefix or a suffix and identify the root word. Now, once you've completed your chilies and you've got your tricky words written down, I'd like you to complete this part. So say the words, shout it, whisper them, clap them, and if you can, act them out. It'd be lovely if you could record yourselves doing this and send your videos in to the Year 6 email address. Here is my turn, Year 6. Now I've chosen the word distorted. Now you might have seen that highlighted in the text when I read it out. Now I'm going to show you Chili 1 and Chili 2 because they both require that you research the word. But Chili 2's, you need to predict what the word means. Now, it's not possible for me to predict what the word means just by looking at the word like this, is it? I need to go back to the text. So let's go back. Read the sentence and read around the word and see if I can work out what it means. Here we go then. So I've highlighted the word. I'll just read the sentence that the word is in. So let's go. There's my full stop. Let's go back to the beginning of the sentence. Okay. He was so short that Alex's first impression was that he was looking at a reflection that had somehow been distorted. So Alex's first impression that he was looking at a reflection that had been distorted. Now, if you look at a reflection, you expect to see the exact same thing looking back at you, don't you? When you look into a mirror, you expect to see a true and accurate image looking back at you. But here Alex is doubting that, isn't he? He says that he's looking at a reflection that had somehow been distorted. Now I think I'm going to try that strategy of putting a synonym in place of distorted and see if it makes sense. So he was so short that Alex's first impression was that he was looking at a reflection that had somehow been changed, or that had somehow been warped, perhaps? Because I'm getting the impression here that Alex doesn't think that Herod Sile actually looks the way he looks in his reflection. Okay, so that's my prediction then. I predict that distorted means changed. Okay, then I need to look that word up in the dictionary to check. So let's take a look. Distorted. So it means the act of twisting or altering. So altering is a synonym for changing something out of its true, natural or original state. The act of distorting. Okay, so I was pretty close there, wasn't I? Fantastic. Once you've completed your chilies, I would love for you to send in your vocabulary to the Year 6 at frenchprimary.wus.uk email address, because I will use your tricky words, your examples of vocabulary, to make the next Kahoot quiz. Okay, so your words, what you've researched and your tricky words will be used in the next Kahoot quiz. So please make sure that you send those in.
Should we carry on reading a little bit more of chapter 7? I think so. My friends call me Alex. Why? After Alex Ferguson, I'm a big fan of Manchester United. It was the first thing that Alex could think of. But he'd seen a football poster in Felix Leicester's bedroom, and he knew that at least he'd chosen the right team. Sile smiled. That's most amusing, Alex. Alex it shall be. And I hope we will be friends, Alex. You are a very lucky boy. You won the competition, and you are going to be the first teenager to try out my Stormbreaker. But this is also lucky, I think, for me. I want to know what you think of it. I want you to tell me what you like, what you don't. The eyes dipped away, and suddenly he was businesslike. We have only 3 days until the launch, he said. We'd better get a bloody move on, as my father used to say. I'll have my man take you to your room, and tomorrow morning, first thing, you must get to work. There's a maths programme you should try, also languages. All the software was developed here at Sile Enterprises. Of course, we've talked to children, we've gone to teachers, to education experts, but you, my dear Alex, you'll be worth more to me than all of them put together. As he had talked, Sile had become more and more animated, carried away by his own enthusiasm. He had become a completely different man. Alex had to admit that he'd taken an immediate dislike to Herod Sile. No wonder Blunt and the people at MI6 mistrusted him. But now he was forced to think again. He was standing opposite one of the richest men in England, a man who had decided, out of the goodness of his heart, to give a huge gift to British schools. Just because he was small and slimy, that didn't necessarily make him an enemy. But perhaps Blunt was wrong after all. Ah, here's my man now, Sile said, and about bloody time. The door had opened and a man had come in dressed in the black suit and tails of an old-fashioned butler. He was as tall and thin as his master, was short and round, with a thatch of ginger hair above a face so pale it was almost paper white. From a distance it looked as if he was smiling, but as he drew closer, Alex gasped. The man had 2 horrendous scars, one on each side of his mouth, twisting up all the way to his ears. It was as if someone had attempted to cut his face in half. The scars were a gruesome shade of mauve. There were smaller, fainter scars where his cheeks had once been stitched. This is Mr. Grin, Sile said. He changed his name after his accident. Accident? Alex found it hard not to stare at the terrible wounds. Mr. Grin used to work in a circus. It was a novelty knife-throwing act. The climax, he used to catch a spinning knife between his teeth. But then one night his elderly mother came to see the show. She waved to him from the front row, and he got his timing wrong. He's worked for me for a dozen years now, and although his appearance may be displeasing, he is loyal and efficient. Don't try to talk with him, by the way. He has no tongue. Mr. Grin said. Nice to meet you, Alex muttered. Take him to the blue room, Sile commanded. He turned to Alex. You're fortunate that one of our nicest rooms has come up free. Here, in the house. We had a security man staying there, but he left us quite suddenly. Oh, why was that? Alex asked casually. I have no idea. One moment he was here, the next he was gone. Sile smiled again. I hope you won't do the same, Alex. Mr. Grin gestured at the door, and, leaving Herod Sile standing in front of his huge captive, Alex left the room. He was led along a passage past more works of art, up a staircase, and then along a wide corridor with thick wood-panelled doors and chandeliers. Alex assumed that the main house was used for entertaining. Sile himself must live there. But the computers would be constructed in the modern buildings he had seen opposite the airstrip. Presumably, he would be taken there tomorrow. His room was at the far end. It was a large room with a 4-poster bed and a window looking out onto the fountain. Darkness had fallen, and the water, cascading 10 metres through the air over a semi-naked statue that looked remarkably like Herod Sile, was eerily illuminated by a dozen concealed lights. Next to the window was a table with an evening meal already laid out for him: ham, cheese, salad. His bag was lying on the bed. He went over to it, a Nike sports bag, and examined it. When he had closed it up, he had inserted 3 hairs into the zip, trapping them in the metal teeth. They were no longer there. Alex opened the bag and went through it. Everything was exactly as it had been when he had packed, but he was certain that the sports bag had been expertly and methodically searched. See you for tomorrow's lesson, Year 6.